those kind of year end. Here's what happened in 2024, and I got the Spotify. I enjoy my music and podcasts, and I use Spotify, and they always send me kind of my year in review of the artists and songs I've listened to the most that I couldn't get out of my head. Starbucks lets me know which drink my wife wanted me to order most for her, and of course I enjoyed them too. Goodreads lets me know if I accomplished my reading goal of I try to set a goal of 52 books in a year, and yes, audiobooks count. Okay, and you know what? I've started the new year already reading some good books, listening to some good music and podcasts, and I guess we haven't had Starbucks yet, have we? We'll look forward to that eventually. But it's okay to enjoy a treat every now and again, right? Well, if you're wondering, my top song was Paradoxology by Tempetope, which maybe you've never ever heard of. I'm trying to remember how or when I came across it last year. But I really enjoy the words of that, just talking about how God is kind of, and his greatness, it's both sides, and it almost doesn't make sense, and it's so wonderful. And so I encourage you to check out that song if you're interested, Paradoxology by Tempetope. I found it very, very encouraging and worshipful. Very hard to pick a favorite book from last year, but one that stood out for me was, other than the Bible, of course, was a book by Philip Yancey, Where the Light Fell. I really enjoy reading people's memoirs, and that's his kind of memoir, his life story. Up to, he's still alive, so it's still going, but up until he wrote it. And if you're curious, the top drink was a PSL, pumpkin spice latte. Well, I wonder, as I was kind of thinking back through all of those and getting the 2024 recaps, I wonder what it would look like if God gave us a bit of a year in review. What would it look like if God gave me this kind of snapshot of, like, here's 2024. Here's what you prayed about the most. Here's what you prayed about the most. Here's where you missed what I was doing. Here's where you saw me come through. How many times did I go to God first? How many times did I maybe wait a little bit? What about you? What would your top prayer of last year have been? The one that kind of carried through the year, where you prayed maybe for a month long, something that was on your heart, a desire that you just brought before God. What were you most thankful for? Not thinking now like, oh, you know what, I'm most thankful for this last year, but what did you actually last year say, God, I'm so thankful for this? The most times. Maybe it was your health, maybe it was family, maybe it was just for having survived another day. God, thank you for getting me through work today. A look back at your actions and your habits can give you incredible insight into what maybe you need to learn or to change or be thankful for in this upcoming new year. You know, remembering is something that is greatly important to us. And it can prepare us for what will be. You know, it's why we train, why we practice, why we develop habits and study for tests. Because we are trying to put into memory, whether muscle memory, mind memory, or making memories. We are trying to get ready for what's next. To have something to bring forward. And remembrance is a common theme in Scripture. Constantly, God is telling people to remember. Remember. Moses and the prophets are constantly calling people, remember. Jesus invites his disciples, and his disciples in turn invite the early church to remember. And in fact, it's why we are going to join in communion later, to remember. And this morning we are going to look at Deuteronomy chapter 7, starting in verse 17, at a part where the people of Israel are in a bit of transition. Though it may not have been a new year, it was a new stage that they were preparing for. As they had left a terrible situation in Egypt and moved across the desert towards the promised land, having encountered many challenges along the way, many hardships, seeing God come through in so many different ways, Moses speaks to the people to encourage them to remember, to let the lessons of the past be committed to memory. As we read, you can almost picture Moses giving this passionate speech, knowing that the stakes ahead are high. Let's read Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 17 to 26. He says, "You may say to yourselves, 'These nations are stronger than we are. How can we drive them out?' But do not be afraid of them. Remember well what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt. You saw with your own eyes the great trials, the signs and wonders, the mighty hand and outstretched arm with which the Lord your God brought you out. The Lord your God will do the same to all the peoples you now fear. Moreover, the Lord your God will send the hornet among them until even the survivors who hide from you have perished. Do not be terrified by them, for the Lord your God, who is among you, is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will drive out those nations before you, little by little. You will not be allowed to eliminate them all at once, or the wild animals will multiply around you. But the Lord your God will deliver them over to you, throwing them into great confusion until they are destroyed. He will give their kings into your hand, and you will wipe out their names from under heaven. No one will be able to stand up against you. You will destroy them. The images of their gods you are to burn in the fire. Do not covet the silver and gold on them, and do not take it for yourselves, or you will be ensnared by it. For it is detestable to the Lord your God. Do not bring a detestable thing into your house, or you, like it, will be set apart for destruction. Regard it as vile and utterly detest it, for it is set apart for destruction." Moses, as if speaking to his children, he gives them counsel as they move towards the realization of God's promises. A promise that Moses had worked so hard to get to, endured so much. A promise that he would only see from a distance. As a prophet, Moses warns the people to hold to remembrance as he sees the temporary temptations of life on the horizon. With excitement ahead, there also comes obstacles and challenges. See, as we look ahead to 2025, there may be exciting things on the way. Birthdays, anniversaries, parties, vacation. But with it too, there are also obstacles that you will face and challenges that you will face this year. Maybe some of those challenges and obstacles are right at the forefront of your mind. And Moses tells the people, remember what God has done. I want you to take a moment, look back, see what you have been through. Moses says to the people, remember when you were slaves in Egypt. Remember you and your parents and your grandparents crying out to God for some relief, for someone to deliver them. Remember how magnificently God showed up. Remember what God did. Remember how He parted the Red Sea, how He provided for you along the way. Remember what God did. You did not have to fight. You merely had to watch and trust God's incredible plan as you fulfilled your work and moved forward. Moses said, you may say to yourself, these nations are stronger than we are. How can we drive them out? There's going to come times, there was probably times last year, the year before. There's going to come times this year where you are going to look at what's ahead of you and you're going to say, how in the world am I going to get through this? How am I going to pay that bill? How am I going to figure out this job situation? How am I going to speak to my manager, my family? How am I going to get through this moment? How am I going to graduate? How will I ever overcome it? And Moses says, you are going to have those moments. He says that to the people. You're going to see people in front of you in the land that God has for you, that seem to block God's promises. And you're going to say, how in the world is this going to happen? How are we going to get past this? Now, Moses wasn't just speaking purely hypothetically. He wasn't necessarily just saying, well, I think this will probably happen. We've never seen it before, but it might happen. No, Moses had been there. He had been there. In fact, the last time they approached the promised land, people had been like, how in the world are we going to get there? Caleb and Joshua stand out amongst the 12 that go and say, no, God's got this. Moses himself had been there. After having been stripped of his royalty, his position in Egypt, and having a death sentence placed on him. And then God saying, I want you to go back to Egypt because I want you to lead these people out. Moses knew that what God was asking was impossible. And God showed Moses miracles to say, hey, I've got this. Just follow me. And Moses still responds in Exodus 4, verses 10 to 13. Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. God, I'm terrible at talking. You do not want me to represent you. And the Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. And Moses, of course, said, I'm not going to worry about what's ahead of me. I'm not going to worry about the big thing. God's on my side. No, that's not what Moses said. He said, verse 13, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. See, when Moses is speaking to the Israelites, he's speaking from experience. He's like, I've been there. I know what it's like. You're going to face obstacles. And it will be so much better, so much easier if you just remember what God has done, knowing what He will do. You know what's incredible? God has a habit of taking the most fearsome obstacles and making them the means of deliverance. God has a habit of taking the biggest things in front of us and using them as a means of deliverance. See, Moses' obstacle was himself at that time. And God looked at Moses and said, I'm going to use you. The slaves of Egypt, their obstacle was Pharaoh. God looked at Pharaoh and said, you're not going to like it, and you will fight me, but I'm going to use you. God can take the biggest obstacle ahead of us and turn it into a means of deliverance. Our obstacle, we stare at death. And Jesus looked at the cross and went forward as if to say, I'm going to use you. But standing before whatever it is, let's be honest. We might be scared. We might be worried, anxious. And it makes sense. Which is why Moses says, you're going to face it. It's going to happen. You're going to encounter things, people that are bigger, better, stronger than you. The path before you is absolutely intimidating. And let's be honest, it is so for legitimate reasons. But remember, take a look back and see what God has done when you felt that way before. Take a look back and see how God brought you through. Remember the plagues. Remember that parting sea, the water from a rock, manna from the heaven. Remember what God did so you can be excited about what He will do. Do not be afraid of them. Remember well what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all of Egypt. You saw with your own eyes the great trials, the signs and wonders, and the mighty hand and outstretched arm with which the Lord your God brought you out. Remember what God has done. Now I know some of you, hopefully all of you, can say, I saw God at work last year. There were times when I was faced with something and God brought me through. God brought my family through. God did some incredible things. And if you're comfortable, I'd like to take a moment. If you're comfortable in sharing, you know what, this is what God did for me last year. Maybe it's something that seems small to other people, but it was big to you. If you're willing to share, I'd love to hear it, and I'm sure it will encourage everybody. Does anybody have something that, you know what, you'd like to share? Dave? Yeah. 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 Moving is stressful. And you had a lot, you and your family had a lot going on. And to be able to get into your new house and be like, wow, God, you lined everything up when it felt like things were not going the right way. And yeah. That's awesome. Gail. Yeah. Yeah. Gail, your passion to be here and God's faithfulness in bringing you here, it's inspiring. And so thank you for trusting in God and coming. Yeah. Thank God for that. For providing. What does it need just to be here? Anybody else want to share? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Wendy, you broke your hip, and may I share about the concern of the timing of it? You were hoping to go to a wedding, grandson's wedding, and a broken hip is not conducive to going to a wedding and traveling and being a part of that. And yet, God was faithful. It wasn't easy, but you got to go there, and He's been healing your hip. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Mariah. New friends. Yeah. It can be intimidating coming to a new place and trying to meet people. And just God being faithful, and I've got people lined up for you. Yeah. And oh no. Yeah. That's awesome. It'd be, yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It is not easy to see without glasses. Yeah. God faithful through going through a stroke and then not being able to see when you're trying to rest and providing for that. Yeah, Vistine. Yeah. Mm. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Miguel, I'm glad you're here this morning. And Bill, you too. But God's been faithful in those kind of scary moments. And I mean, New Year's Day, looking at a new year, and you're like, is this what this year's going to be about? And being able to sit here and be like, thank you, God. That's awesome. That's awesome. God is at work. God did some incredible things last year. And I know for a fact that we could go on and on. There'd be more of you that have stories that you could share. This is how God came through. Last year I had the opportunity of officiating a friend's wedding, and at that wedding I saw somebody from the previous church I was at who had left a few years back, and but a conversation that we had back in, I want to say it was 2019. 2019, and I think he moved away kind of 2020-ish. And I had a conversation with him, and it was one of those conversations where I just felt for the guy, but there was also that sense of like, you're not getting what I'm saying to you. Have you ever talked to someone and you just want to shake them? And yet he came up to me and was like, I remember that conversation. And I get it now. I get it now. And that was just such an encouragement of reminding me that, you know what, God is doing some incredible work when I can't always see it. And so we can remember those moments when God showed up in a big way last year, and look forward and know that He's got plans to deal with the obstacles ahead. He's got plans for the things that show up. Moses, after encouraging everyone to look back and remember God's faithfulness, was able to say, the Lord your God will do the same to all the peoples you now fear. Just as God has done in the past, He'll be there for you in the future. You can rest assured that God will be there. Now, this is not a guarantee that you will always get the outcome that you want. But God will be there, even when it seems like He's not. Because you know He was there in the past. Moses says, do not be terrified by them. When you face these situations, don't be afraid. He continues, for the Lord your God who is among you, He is among you. He's not just over there. He's not just waiting up ahead. He is going with you. He is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will drive out the nations before you little by little. You will not be allowed to eliminate them all at once, or the wild animals will multiply around you. But the Lord your God will deliver them over to you, throwing them into great confusion until they are destroyed. Don't be afraid when plans fail or falter. Don't be worried when you're faced with insurmountable odds. God will not bring you to where you want to go just to have you return back, or where He wants you to go, just to have you return back where He saved you from. God wasn't going to take these people out of Egypt. And at times when they saw things not going the way they wanted, and they said, oh, remember our time in Egypt? Wasn't that so great? Like, when they were slaves, like, at least we had food. But God's not going to bring you this far and then be like, well, you're on your own. God will surely bring you where He wants you to be. You trust Him. You continue to follow Him. And you know what's a bit of an uncomfortable truth? You will see God at work in greater capacity the bigger obstacle that you face when you follow Him through it. See, the bigger thing you face, the bigger opportunity you have to see God work. See, there are so many times when I pray for little things and they come through and it's like, okay, was that coincidence? God, was that? No, God's in coincidences. And yet when those big things happen, things that we don't want to face, we can see, wow, God, you got me through that. If you have an annoying little splinter, you can be thankful to God for tweezers. But when you face things that you wish you could ignore or avoid, those big things, what an opportunity for God to say, hey, I'm here with you. Just trust me. His timing may not be immediate, but it will always be right and be good. And you may not even see it in this life, but you will see God's goodness on full display when Jesus' kingdom is fully established. See, Moses saw God's promises from a distance. He didn't get to enter the promised land. And there might be things in our lives that God, I just want to see this. God, I want to see this happen. And God may say, you know what? I've got a plan for that. But you may not see it. And those can be hard moments. But God's plan is good and it is right. And because he knew who was in charge, Moses then offers a command and a warning. He says, the images of their gods you are to burn in fire. Do not covet the silver and gold on them, and do not take it for yourselves, or you will be ensnared by it, for it is detestable to the Lord your God. Do not bring a detestable thing into your house, or you, like it, will be set apart for destruction. Regard it as vile and utterly detest it, for it is set apart for destruction. Moses, knowing who was in charge, says, you know what? You might see the prosperity of these other fake gods. You might look at it and be like, well, I want that. You might be tempted to enjoy, maybe even worship what they worship. Get rid of it. Do away with it. Or it will ensnare you. As you try and take hold of it, it will grab hold of you. Now they say that curiosity killed the cat. And I can understand that, thankfully not to its full extent. But actually just this week, Joanna was putting away some of my clothes, some of the laundry into the drawers, and she had the drawers open, and our little cat, little black pumpkin, decided that she wanted to explore. And so she weaved her way in the top drawer and then in behind the drawers. And she was trapped. She wanted to see all that there was and got in behind it and was trapped. She was not going to be able to crawl back out because it kind of fell down. And if Joanna hadn't realized it, and we'd left the drawers the way they were, she would have stayed there with no hope of escape. Her desire to explore had ensnared her. So Moses warns the people, and I share this warning to you. Be careful what you desire, because it may ensnare you. Moses' warning is this: keep God first. Keep God first. Remember, keep Christ first. There's so much that can easily ensnare us. The devil wants to use our good desires that God has given us, twist them, and focus them on something that is not of Him. It was Christ who saved us, not ourselves, not others. It is Jesus that offers us life, not money, not others. Joshua knew that God needed to be first. And perhaps recalling the words of his then deceased mentor Moses, Joshua took over for Moses. Joshua, after they've entered the promised land, he speaks to the people and he says in Joshua 24:14-15, "Now fear the Lord and serve Him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Each new day, each new year is an opportunity to say, God, I'm going to serve you. God, I'm going to serve you. Jesus, I'm going to serve you as Lord. My house, we're going to do our best to strive and keep Jesus first, to serve God. And that's why I love that we start the year off. I mean, we do it every month. The first Sunday of every month, we take communion. The first Sunday of the year, to be able to remember what Jesus has done for us. I'm going to invite the team to come back as we prepare for communion. And I invite you to remember with me what Christ has done. And in taking this, to say, Jesus, because of what you have done, I'm so thankful I can say, I'm going to serve you. I'm going to put you first. Help me to do that. As we join together, let's remember what Jesus did and all that it means. Jesus longs to leave no area of your life untouched by His wonderful goodness, faithfulness, His plan for you. If you would like to remember with us to declare Jesus' victory and put God first, if you have already done so, I invite you to join with us in communion as we declare Jesus Lord and as we remember. Hold on to the cracker and juice as you receive it, and we will eat and drink it together as we remember. If you need a gluten-free option, that is available. Just let one of our servers know, and they will get that to you. So let's take a moment to sing and remember as the emblems are passed out.